Issue 261 Reboot. Immediately the story is aggravating, as the bad guy says that the priestess has allowed outsiders onto holy ground without royal permission. First of all, she would have gotten royal permission instead of being handed the idiot ball. Second, how racist are these people if they don't allow outsiders to sacred ground? Compared to, say, Israel, where they welcome tourists from all over the world to sites that are considered holy. So now I have even more reason to hate these sea people, because not only do most of them look ridiculous, but they're also nerd-level racists. I was not expecting an entire filler arc. At least it makes sense because they're isolated from the land people for their entire history to the point where the priestess didn't know land-based cultures had chow. But wait a minute, if that's the case, how do they speak the same language as Sonic? That actually applies to the NERPs a lot more. So no wonder I assumed they were familiar with land-based cultures. Because they know English. I'm just forced to assume that the person in universe who wrote Fate predestined it that everyone would only speak English because they're too lazy to come up with other languages. So it's not written into Fate that anybody would start speaking a different language, or even start speaking a very different dialect, or even accent. Aside from, like, the 3 that we've seen. You'd think these guys would at least have accents if they're that not used to land people. He missed a prime opportunity. This would feel more like world building if they, I don't know, had Russian accents or something. Again, I have to question why Flynn thought writing something as inherently frustrating as lawful stupid authority figures antagonizing the heroes was remotely worth it again when he should know it always pisses off the audience, just for the sake of padding things out. I think he could have not written this conflict and nothing would have been lost. There's a reason I assumed this kind of thing would never happen and Sonic was allowed to come here, because I have common sense. I also assumed that the priestess was the ultimate authority in this place, because this is already a town where a priestess takes care of Chow in a temple, and she has the authority to tell Razor to bring Sonic there. So I assumed she was the one with the most respect. I guess literally everyone just assumed she got the permission of the royalty, and nobody questioned her on it at all. Not even one person thought to remind her just in case. You know it sucks when the story has you aggravated from the first panel. The only character who doesn't look horrible here is the mantis shrimp. I didn't think things could get any worse. Instead, Razor says that Coral has better authority to decide who visits the temple than the king or queen. I wonder how unlikable the king and queen are that they think they should decide that when it's none of their business. And instead of this guy backing down, he mocks him for being quick to defend Coral and randomly accuses him of covering for his failure to secure this place. Even though if Sonic was really a threat, he'd have made it obvious a long time ago, and that should be obvious immediately. So how racist are these dickwads to still think Sonic should be ushered out? And he's drawn with a smirk to annoy the audience even more. I'd better see him get a ton of slapstick. But I think even that's too much to expect. Even the most basic of good writing where the bad guy gets punished enough. I'm guessing he'll even keep his job. When you've made everyone smart in your audience this cynical, you have failed. I don't see why Flynn didn't just write Razor is already dating Coral. I thought he was because he had his hand on her shoulder. And he wasn't the same species as her, but maybe he isn't dating her since he's mocked about defending her honor instead of that being taken as a given. Rotor suddenly tells Razor that he's just trying to get him in trouble, and because Flynn thought we weren't annoyed by this guy enough, he has another bad line. He says that this is why defense should be left to the professionals, not boys playing at being heroes, even though Razor was called an ocean warrior in his first text box. First of all, why does he say, "This is why"? Second, if he knew that Rotor and Sonic were heroes, he wouldn't have angrily led an army against them. If he doesn't know they're freedom fighters, then he has no reason to say this. This is why the reboot was a bad comic so far. If I want something that I can always guarantee will make me angry, all I have to do is read an issue of this and I'm guaranteed to get in a bad mood. Meanwhile, the Rick and Morty comic has me smiling almost the whole time. But if you ever want something that'll piss you off, read this comic. I feel like when I'm done with Flynn, I'll write a list of every single original character he introduced, and make a whole video about them. and we'll see how many of them are assholes that suck. I'm expected to believe that it makes sense that she didn't get royal permission because it was too late last night, even though it was clearly dusk when Sonic was at the beach, not night. And if she's expected to be able to contact the royalty at all, she should just have their cell phone number and call them in a second. Sure, she'd wake someone up if it's really that late, but apparently she wouldn't get in trouble if she really has to get permission. The city having a king and queen isn't that great world building, if at all, because we've already seen the concept of a king because of Sally's father, not to mention Archie Sonic. And they're unlikable, so they're not a good addition to the world anyways. Also, she says that the magic rings power the city, and so they visit every morning. How does that justify them visiting every morning? Aren't they the army? It's not like they're electricians who would know how to make sure generators are still working. They're supposed to fight attacking soldiers, and Sonic's clearly not dressed like one. And if their culture is really isolated, they wouldn't have even had to fight any other countries, so they wouldn't even have a military. At least the NERB story didn't have the NERBs have a military. And I thought the heroes weren't even in the city. They went to the surface to go to a building made of sand on the beach. So why are these guys even here? Them not knowing land-based cultures would have been completely justified if they were unable to go to the land because they could only breathe underwater. But that'd be too simple. Sonic the Comic, on the other hand, had the sea creatures have to stay underwater because they can't breathe above water. So they needed a magical science thing to solve that problem. That was more interesting than they're just regular people who look bad. Also, I've been assuming she's been talking about special magic rings and not just rings from Sonic, because if that's what she's talking about, saying magic rings would be redundant. And what wouldn't be powered by rings if something so famously common can power stuff? Why would they be common around here and not everywhere else? What even are they? At least Archie explained where rings came from. And we get another panel of Worthless Shrimp's dialogue. This is so obviously tedious and unnecessary. He says that no one is to break curfew while the monsters roam the night waters. Again, it was dusk when the heroes met with Razor. Is the writer honestly that stupid that he thinks dusk is night? If not, then why didn't he write any of these heroes to instantly correct him? None of them were ever out at nightfall. Yet another panel drags out the story with Mr. Awful complaining because the evolution ceremony takes minutes and the Chow hasn't gotten out of the reincarnation cocoon yet. Why would he blame her for this? This is obviously a supernatural event out of her control, and she makes a stupid excuse. Is Coral a Sympathy Sue? Or whatever the name is? Because I don't think she has any good qualities to justify her being liked by the characters. She's just an idiot. I guess a good quality could be an absence of a bad quality because she's not evil, but it seems like the only thing she's done is act pitiful. She hasn't actually accomplished anything or shown any real talents that nobody else could do, or been really nice to someone. I'm sure she takes care of Chow, but anyone who can move could do that. If all she's gonna do is try to get pity, well, it's working, but that's because it's a cheap shortcut for the writer to get sympathy for a character. You can't just write on that. Eventually, someone will get tired of it. Especially because she's a girl, and weak-willed female characters don't look too progressive. So that instantly felt tiresome. The guy then confuses me because he expects me to believe that Chow, Aquarius, is central to their way of life. How? He tells the city guard to bring a charlatan and the trespassers before the king and queen, as I'm just confused and frustrated. It's inevitable that the audience will be frustrated with some stories, but that doesn't guarantee the stories are bad, as long as they have enough good in them to make up for that. But this probably won't, because that's almost never the case with a reboot. Because this isn't enjoyable at all, and could have easily not been written, it's really obvious to me that it's padding. It's nothing but padding, so I'm not gullible enough to fall for it and see it as a legitimate excuse to stretch this out to a story arc. We could have not had the story exist, and just immediately cut to something exciting happening that would end the arc. The only reason the heroes came here was to find a Gaia temple to put an emerald in. They should have just been in and out of there. That'd be a second, logically. Even less than that, because everyone should know where all the temples are to begin with. Not need to go there to confirm. Right now, I just want this guy and the guards to be killed. I'm guessing they won't, because in a comic dark enough to have a plot like this for no reason, killing off these guys is too dark. Even though it's not dark because it makes the audience happy. Sonic says they could be invited to join Coral and come along quietly. I don't know how the heroes aren't losing their tempers. If I'm expected to be endeared to and care about these sea people, I don't think that's going to be possible anymore. Because the only thing I'll ever associate Meropis with is this. Razor is an idiot again, saying that she's not going and expecting his non-existent authority to be followed. And Coral says she'll go as if she has a choice and expects me to believe there must be someone to attend the temple at all times. It's just I guess to take care of the Chow. But she's talking as if Razor and Pearly don't even exist. Sonic tells the captain that he could either have a casual stroll or an international incident. That threat rang hollow immediately and should have been called out. It would have worked if, 1, he simply threatened to tell social media how these guys are treating their hero, or 2, Sally was here, because she's a princess. That would cause an international incident. If they're going to another country with its own royalty, wasn't it immediately obvious that the princess should come along as an ambassador? I mean, in universe, the heroes didn't know they'd come to another country, but meta logic-wise, of course Sally should have been here. Compare this to Archie, where of course Sally went along when they first went to Station Square. And later on, she was instrumental in convincing its government to accept some refugees. It all made sense because she was a princess. Instead, she's off on a mission she doesn't even need to be in. This isn't taking advantage of her character at all. Instead, Amy of all people is here. I guess it's better for her to be taken seriously than be a really bad joke. So Asshole decides to let Razor's sister stay and help because he knows she's an apprentice who trained in the rites. What rites? So it is used as a normal temple? What's the point of wasting time with rites? I guess she's not Razor's sister because she's a manta ray instead of a shark. Even though Sonic and Sally had kids just fine. Maybe I assumed that because why else would a little kid be here? If she's not related to one of them. Why would a little kid be allowed to be an apprentice to someone and that's the only reason they're there? Child labor laws are a thing. So the heroes are told they'll be escorted to the royalty and are expected to beg forgiveness for breaking curfew that they clearly never broke in the first place, and nobody's saying that. And Rotor's at least sweet for once by putting his hands on Pearly's shoulders and saying that he'll keep her company. And it'll give him time to keep researching the place. Wait, Pearly's the idiot who's afraid of Chow. How did she get trained in the rites? How was she considered qualified to be here? Like, she would have been turned down on the first day. They would have just accepted some other applicant. How could she just be casually trusted to look after Chow? I guess he doesn't know about a stupid phobia. Sonic's completely impossible to relate here because he's just smug the whole time instead of angry. I miss Fleetway Sonic. He'd be relatable here instead of just sticking out like a sore thumb every second. He's smug because he's smug in the games. Never mind what's actually happening right now. I don't know how he had a cool enough head to say exactly the right things in the situation. It should have been Rotor, since he's the smart one. Or better yet, Sally. Then the bad guy decides to waste the guard's time staying here and keeping an eye on things. I guess because he's racist and thinks all non-sea people are guaranteed to inevitably cause trouble despite no history of bad blood with other cultures. And somehow nobody's calling him out on this paranoia. The guard looks horrible, by the way. Honestly, I'm at the point where I think even literal DeviantArt OCs would usually look better than these Mobians sometimes. At least an OC based on Sonic still has a good design as a foundation because it's shaped like Sonic. So there's basically no room to go wrong there. Amy's still able to find the underwater city gorgeous, as I wonder what their text being blue means. She's so different from Sonic that she wants to go visit underwater cities, while Sonic doesn't. Sonic just hates the idea of underwater cities because they're wet. And it turns out that everyone they pass hates them because of racism. Okay, I'm gonna call another double standard here. Game purists mock Archie for showing humans being racist against Mobians. They snark at it like it's ridiculous when they see panels showing out of context. And granted, I'm not enjoying this either, but it's even worse for me because the victims of racism are the likable main characters. Well, we're supposed to like them. So those same people who hate Archie for this kind of thing had better hate this too, instead of instantly forgiving it because it's by Flynn. I hope this was called out on because that's only fair. At least Amy liking the underwater city in spite of all she's been through is reinforcing the idealism that was likable about her character in SA1. If she was mostly like that, I might be able to like her. I want to forgive her for Sonic X and Boom because it's stressful to not like her, but I'm really not in the mood for that right now. The reboot doesn't consist of that many issues to begin with, so that's not very many issues to make me forgive her and take her seriously again. After 2 entire cartoons where she was mean to her friends. Although to be fair, I think it was only the 3rd season of Sonic X where she got really bad. Then it turns out that ever since the earthquakes, the waters have gotten murkier. What, because of pollution? Dark Gaia energy caused pollution now? That makes no sense. And worst of all, the citizens have gotten nastier. First of all, this better not lead to an entire comic where every time they visit a town, the civilians are nasty, and the excuse is Dark Gaia energy. I was relieved at first to read this line because there might be an actual excuse for all this, but that's ignoring the fact that obviously writing civilians as unlikable is annoying as hell. And it's bad enough to have a few annoying characters. It's even more of a story ruiner when an entire town is that way. I already watched Sonic Boom, wasn't that enough? This isn't an idea that should be used, because there's no way it couldn't be frustrating. I expected him to have learned his lesson from the backlash against the Mobians hating Nicole. Sometimes the civilians in Bikini Bottom are annoying, but at least there I can understand why if it's meant to be a joke. But I don't see how this is funny. Sonic Unleashed had the civilians get possessed by Dark Gaia energy sometimes, and it wasn't really used that much. Though I don't remember much about it because I just played the Wii version, which really underused it because there were no hub worlds to actually walk around and waste a bunch of your time. I've only heard that in the other versions of the game you can use a camera of chips on people and fight monsters afterwards. I only remember one time a civilian was a jerk because of that in Unleashed. It was the professor's assistant, and he told Sonic to go away, and I didn't like it there either. And there was one scene where a bunch of civilians were dancing, and that guy was a jerk because he forced Amy to dance with them. But the rest of them were just dancing. The horror! And before that, we saw an ice cream salesman crying and despairing. I'd rather see that. I'd rather see these guys dancing than being racist. Wasn't that obvious? Also, the racism against outsiders doesn't need this as an explanation. But it does give me relief and hope that maybe they aren't normally like that and are just being brainwashed. But again, why is the Dark Gaia energy acting like evil energy from Mega Man and brainwashing people to be more racist? And the fact that the possessed people also danced, which isn't evil, just makes it more confusing. Are they evil or not? Is it supposed to exaggerate the negativity in people? Or the positivity? Not keeping its effects consistent just makes the entire concept of people being made to act differently from the Dark Gaia energy just look arbitrary, which makes the entire concept look stupid and unnecessary. It wasn't bad enough that the world was shattered. It's already distractingly arbitrary that monsters came out of the deal. Sonic Unleashed just isn't believable enough of a plot, even by Sonic standards, to justify using ever again. I mean, why would the monsters make people dance with nothing to gain, instead of just dancing themselves? Wouldn't that have been funny at least? I gotta take a break from this story. It's nothing but gloom and doom with a plot point that didn't need to exist. It's pretty sad when being exactly like the game's plot would actually be better here. There's not even any legitimate comedy relief. There's no light-hearted subplot to make you feel better. I thought it couldn't get any worse. And then we see the king. He looks like he's a little toddler who has no business being in a throne room as a result. And appropriately, he throws a tantrum about the heroes going to the temple because he's racist too. This isn't even how I pictured the king and queen to be. Not even for this story. So even that expectation wasn't met. I picture them to be dignified, serious people, because that's kind of obvious. And this guy's literally how I would feel like writing him as a parody. If you know it's stupid enough to be made fun of, why are you writing it anyways? Really? He didn't think this was a waste of time? Compare this to how polite the mayor of Station Square was. It's not that hard. And somehow Coral is blamed for the earthquakes and monsters. So is the religion of their country somehow expecting priests to ward off this kind of stuff that nobody could have predicted would happen? Shouldn't they have learned that nobody can ward off instead of blaming Coral? This doesn't make Coral a good character. I can still side with the character I hate when they're treated unfairly, even Boom Sonic. So this doesn't redeem a bad character. It just makes everyone bad. Sonic annoys me immediately by just casually calling the Queen Queenie and bragging about himself. If she doesn't even know him, she just yell at him for speaking out. Oh, she tells the guards to stand down because he's the famous Sonic. Okay, so she heard about him. When I was under the impression that nobody in Meropis knew anything about the outside world because Razor didn't recognize Sonic, and yet she didn't recognize Sonic on sight? This is convenient for Sonic. Considering how unlikable he looks when he's smug, I kind of wanted her to be more realistic here. The little girl with Rotor takes a pebble back and explains that a few months ago the water got really polluted and the city shield barely kept it out. As if things weren't illogical enough. How? First of all, I thought the waters were getting polluted because the planet shattered and its dark Gaia energy. Well, I assume that even though it made no sense because it's the only explanation there seemed to be. I didn't know it had been months since the planet shattered, or maybe it's not because of that, but the waters getting murkier were described in the same text bubble that described the people getting meaner. You'd think they would have sent people out of the city to discover the real source of the pollution, instead of literally everybody just assuming something with no evidence. And if there's a city force field, I refuse to believe it wouldn't keep any of the pollution out. Especially if it's powered by magic. If this was Sadie M, we'd simply be told that Eggman is responsible for the pollution. But that'd be keeping it simple and instantly understandable, and taking advantage of Eggman as a badass villain. So we'd rather confuse the audience than follow their expectations. We're somehow supposed to believe that the city shield was sustained by the magic of arbitrary religious rites. Why would rites be magical? Wouldn't a magical jewel be much simpler and quicker? And therefore that's the only thing someone would bother charming to be magical? A rite that anyone could do would possibly lead to someone evil doing the rite. And the city shield isn't a new idea, because we already saw that for Sandblast City, and it was repeated with New Metropolis. Then I wonder why Pearly took until now to tell Rotor all this stuff, like tell him about the monsters, which even the city guard is scared of. I guess they would be scared because an isolated water city would have no experience with fighting off anybody, so that'd be their first ever time fighting anything. Then the hideous-looking queen says they have enough concerns, what with Akla and his egg army menacing the Great Blue Realm. So are we gonna see him in the arc? That'd be interesting. First off, the egg army is as usual an impossible name to take seriously. She just say army. Anybody would think it sounded stupid, especially since I can imagine that'd be the only army she's dealing with. I guess the city guard is used to war, and maybe that's why they hate outsiders now. You'd think that his egg army would have taken over the city by now. Like, is his technology more advanced than theirs? Because he's backed by Eggman, and I'm not seeing really advanced technology here. And by Great Blue Realm in general, is she expecting me to believe she rules all of the ocean or just the city? Can she just shut up already? So many panels! There's been practically no plot progression. The heroes get dragged to the queen so she can whine because she's racist. That's all that's happened. And that can be just one panel. Maybe it could be explained that Razor is her son and she hates Coral because she's overprotected because she's dating her son. That would have kind of tried to explain it better. Instead of everyone having a personal vendetta against Coral for no actual reason. Pearly says that Aquarius has been reincarnated here for generations, ever since she taught the first settlers how to do the rites. A mere Chow taught them something as complicated as rites? Chow don't even have any fingers. Maybe they're really simple rites. But why would a mere Chow, who I presume has the brain intelligence of a dog, even have the mental capacity to want to waste time with rites? This is no better than Pender's having it that the Chow worshipped chaos. If they were this intelligent, why are they mere pets instead of building cities of their own? Why don't they demand rights? I guess because of their lack of fingers. so they can't build stuff that makes it obvious that they're smart. But it'd still be possible for them to write stuff, actually. Coral mentions the Fates from Greek legend. So they're real in the Sonic universe? So they're probably why everyone speaks English. But you'd think their language of choice would be ancient Greek, not English. But I guess they're English gods in this wacky universe. Why doesn't she pray to the Fates primarily instead of the spirits? The spirits is so broad. She thinks that saying she has unwavering commitment is convincing. I'm shocked that Sonic still remembers that Eggman changed reality with the emeralds. I mean, really? I thought the memories arc was long over by now. Why isn't Amy questioning this? I guess she still remembers too. I guess I shouldn't have been surprised. It would have made sense that he still remembered this, considering that we were told that the memories would inexplicably fade away, if we were told that he wrote down everything he remembered about the Reboot universe, which would be common sense of him. And if the king thinks this is the stupidest thing he's ever heard, why did Flame write that all the way back then if you always knew it was stupid? Sure, Eggman's a great engineer, but if you literally haven't been capable of building anything, like a reality changer, then that makes it impossible to buy they won't change reality again. That's what she should be saying. Because in this kind of universe, Eggman should be assumed to be able to build anything. But a reality changer should be an exception, because if he could build that, why would Sonic still be able to oppose him by now? The Queen says that the planet being shattered is impossible to believe, because the oceans would have drained. I think everyone's pointed out that plot hole was unleashed. If even Flynn knows about it, there's officially no excuse for him not filling it in right away. Not to mention, even using the unleashed plot in the first place, if he knows the sheer extent of how ridiculous it is. Chao are associated with chaos. If chaos is keeping the oceans from being drained, these guys should know that before anyone else. The only reason I know this is because I heard about it already. And by the way, she knows about Sonic, but doesn't know the planet was shattered? That'd be all over the news. Everywhere. She has to have known about the news to have considered Sonic famous and known about him. If she knows Sonic's a famous hero, why would she ever accuse him of lying to her? And then when Amy says they were flying and saw the planet shatter, the Queen stupidly interrupts her at a time like this. Amy wouldn't say they were flying, they'd say they saw it from their sky ship. Really, this wasn't considered unnecessary? She's naturally mad at the Queen for mocking strange ways of flight, as I wonder why the Queen was written to be unlikable when she's a huge focus for the story, which makes the story suck. This isn't focused on the Sonic characters at all, they're just standing there as props. Game purists should hate this. This is just like fanfiction with all the focus on bad OCs. Like, bad OCs are taking over the story here. But at least in fanfiction, the OCs are usually portrayed as characters you're meant to like, not hate. They're portrayed as, like, overly competent, and that's better than being complete idiots. Sonic has to keep Amy's temper in check. Sally would be a bit better suited to this role. Well, I did compliment how Sally was able to be a positive influence on Khan by keeping his temper in check. This isn't really against the Tall and Amy ship. If Fleetway Sonic was here, he'd be angry and actually relatable instead of the smug mascot character. And why isn't there a string connected to this guy's eye patch? It's bad enough this happened with that evil rabbit. I guess with all the crazy religions with no proof out there, it's not impossible to believe that people would make themselves think a Chao, a mere house pet, could bless their city with protection for generations. But still, earthquakes happened, the planet shattered, and fucking monsters and pollution started happening, and this was while Aquarius was around. You'd think those idiots would have gotten a clue. And why doesn't Coral say the name of the spirit? She says the spirit came to her and told her these landwalkers could help them, so she asked the Queen to give her more time to set things right, somehow expecting her to trust her to do anything competent at this point. All I'm thinking is that this entire scene could have been avoided if she got royal permission off screen. We didn't need to see this. This isn't plot progression. The Queen thinks Coral has brought the wrath of the spirits and accuses her of lying. I don't understand. Is the writer enjoying this? Was the writer enjoying writing this? Because this is dragging on. Why did he write Coral? She's not a deep and interesting person, so I'm still wishing she was never created, and this pity party with her isn't changing my mind. It just adds more frustrating panels. She's stripped of her title and privileges, and I'm just confused as hell. Why is he frustrating the audience? We're almost halfway into the story, and this is all that's happened. No Sonic fighting robots, no badness in sight, no game levels. So the game purists should be hating this even more than I do. At least it not being like the games is normally a good thing for me by default. She's told to pack up her belongings from the Usebi's temple. How about a good name? Somehow Sonic thinks they need her when priestesses are by definition not needed, and if a rite is magical, then anybody could do the rite. The Queen does have a good point saying that they need a competent priestess. So okay, go get one. The King wishes their darling princess wasn't abroad because she studied the rites. These are the stupidest royal family members ever. They risked the assassination and life of their only heir by letting her travel abroad? Well, maybe she has bodyguards, but I can't assume that logic is a thing at this point. Why didn't he use his authority as the king to force her to be the priestess? That should have been written instead of him just favoring her and letting her do whatever she wants. She wouldn't have gotten in huge trouble for letting Sonic go to the temple without royal permission, so she would have been a better priestess character. And everyone likes princesses. The Queen is confusingly generous by saying she'll let the hero stay in the temple for the night, even though she hates outsiders. At least Sonic's sarcastic with her, although the whole time he was being snarky with her, I was wondering why she wasn't flipping her lid, and not to mention why the king wasn't. Like Sonic's getting favoritism the whole time, and yet he's not humored by Coral being humored. And at least the Dark Child looks like he feels sorry for Coral. That's more complicated than a Dark Child being pure evil. I guess the more logical route is taken, where Dark Child aren't evil, just untrusting, which is much more broad, and therefore more likely. Amy tells Rotor all about it, and smacks the fruit tree with her hammer. I'm shocked that the hammer didn't go straight through the tree. She kills robots with that thing all the time, and she clearly wasn't holding back here. I'd like to be able to smack fruit off the trees with a hammer when playing as Amy, but why would I ever play as Amy? Rotor's smart enough to admit that they can't take on the entire city, and Sonic somehow thinks he can still convince them at this point. We are halfway into the story and we could have just started here, skipped to this point, and nothing would have actually been lost. Coral didn't need to exist, she's just as much of a padding princess as Relic is. And the absolute worst thing a character can be is a character that only tediously lengthens the story. Sonic tells Rotor that he has no sympathy, when Rotor has a good point that they're better off focusing on saving the entire world. And him saying that doesn't prove he has no sympathy. For once, Rotor is portrayed as smarter, and in the wiser sense. He has to tell Sonic for some reason that arguing with royal jerks just doesn't help, and saving the world needs to come first. Sonic complains that they should be helping everyone, not skipping over the people in trouble while they focus on the big picture. Amy should be saying this, not Sonic. That's why Amy was so interesting in SA1. She was focused on helping one bird, while Sonic just wanted to fight Eggman. A supposed Amy fan missed the perfect opportunity to use Amy as something other than a character who gets mad a lot. This could have been a good moment for Amy, making me respect her more. Instead, it just makes Sonic look like an idiot who wants her time to be wasted. At least if it was Amy, I'd say it was a good character moment, because she would be in character. Rotor arguing with his friends a lot, having a bad dynamic with them, doesn't feel like an actual improvement. Sonic wasn't mad at Rotor and Archie for suggesting that bringing Bunny to Knothole was too dangerous because she might be microchipped. It wasn't dragged out, he just said, "Are we mice or are we men?" and brought her home. Rotor being the shoot the dog to do what's right person has been done before, but I think there's a reason I liked it in Archie and not here. And then to further drive the point of mine home, Amy is the one being the mediator and telling them to calm down. Sally can actually be taken seriously in this kind of position. Amy can't. Amy telling someone else to calm down. Amy's the one who just got told to calm down and smacked a tree just now. She's a hypocrite every time she's in this kind of role. This is probably why it's mocked that she's portrayed like Sally. How am I ever gonna survive IDW? I said I can live with that, about her being a discount Sally in Fleetway, but that's because she's actually a respectable badass over there, not someone who's mean to her friends. And there was no Sally, so I had to settle. Obviously, Amy and Sonic's roles should have been reversed here, ideally. But instead, Amy was the mediator because she's a girl. Like, since when do people need to step in and get Rotor and Sonic to stop arguing? That never happened before, but at least Rotor and Sonic apologized to each other. but I don't know if it's a good thing for the Reboot to have weakened their friendship. Amy's considerate enough to give Coral some space on the Sky Patrol. I just remembered that Sonic and Rotor really didn't like each other in the other M comic. But Sonic asked if they have the water, so the logistics aren't there. Somehow Pearly doesn't think to just stay here and wait until they have the logistics figured out, and instantly tells Coral that her new friends still want her around, which could set her up for false hope, though they could always give Coral an aquarium. She wouldn't need that much water, she's above water all day. They forgot what kind of creature Coral is. Just like, oh, I'm writing a sea creature, of course she would need water, except for the fact that she's always above the surface. And she's expecting this to cheer Coral up, when that wouldn't solve the problem of her being arbitrarily kicked out of the temple by another conflict ball. It's not like she's giving her another job offer, after knowing that she always had 2 different jobs she wanted her whole life, and one of her jobs was accepted. Like, Coral could have wanted to be a musician as well as a priestess. Like, Pearly could say that the dude just got hired for a music gig. That could cheer her up. And it'd make her a deeper character instead of her just being a priestess. But yeah, this is really a conflict ball. Did ancient Greece have situations where priestesses were fired because natural disasters happened? Coral says it's a generous offer, as our time is wasted by nothing but bad original characters dragging out the story. I was fine with this in the Knuckles comic because the characters were likable and interesting, not idiots. Like Remington and Julie Sue and Knuckles' parents, not the Brotherhood though. Coral explains that because Pearly's been learning the rites from her, she'd be barred from the temple too, instead of made a replacement. She apologizes, and somehow actually believes she's made a mess out of everything. It's her who's closest to the Sympathy Sue, not really Sally and Archie. Coral's done nothing useful so far. And her being a girl who's like this just makes it even worse. She could have been a nerdy guy with glasses, instead of a helpless damsel in distress. Coral's told to take care of the shield one last time. And Dark Guy and Monsterfish start approaching the city. Why? I don't know. It's not like they're the Black Arms and they simply need to eat. Actually, you know this is bad. The Black Arms would work better than the Dark Guy monsters. Them wanting to eat a lot makes sense as an actual motive compared to nothing. They just have big appetites and need to eat more. I don't even know if these monsters do eat. They seem to just exist to be enemies in a video game. Razor lampshades that they wasted all day getting yelled at in the city. All day? I thought it was just a couple minutes. Well, maybe they spent hours walking to the city and back, but still. Sonic says it's classy of Coral to do the rites anyways. And it's considerate of Amy to decide to see if she can help. Give her way more moments like this. Maybe if Amy was mostly characterized as a surprisingly nice person, I'd actually like her. Even then, she's in desperate need of a new outfit. Her dress is so short that it's distracting when you've read all of Fleetway where she's got tons of different outfits. I think anything different to wear would go a long way for her being taken seriously. It's a bit superficial, but still, after Sonic Boom Amy's design came out, the modern Amy design instantly became outdated. Just as outdated as a certain person thinks the Freedom Fighters are. Rotor tells the idiots around him that they're welcome to come to the Sky Patrol to give things time to cool down. But why does the writer think I want to see more of these idiots? I'm expected to care about these original characters right away because they're main characters of an arc, when they haven't done much to earn it. Remove all the original characters from the story, and what would you get? A much faster paced story where the heroes go to the temple, leave, and start a better story. It's suddenly revealed that Razor isn't originally from here. That doesn't make as much sense. He sure is lucky he decided to come here and become attached to Coral then, if he's not even from the city. I assumed he grew up with her. I guess he isn't especially close with his family if he just casually decided to go work in another city. Or maybe his city has a really bad job market. We already saw something like this. Just assume a panel is wasted from now on if I don't talk about it, and they drag out the reviews. Coral says it's not working and has a nervous breakdown and thinks she killed Aquarius. Well, that's really unnecessary. This seems to be this character's only purpose, to be made miserable, before I could even get to know how she was normally. Pearly says she can't do the right because she's never done it before. But she's been training in the rights, hasn't she? The city shield breaks, and the monsters start scaring the racists. It makes sense that Asshole would think Coral chose not to do the right, even though it's not like her, because some people wouldn't after being fired. Maybe his logic is he wouldn't have done the right, and he's projecting. Then he's suddenly portrayed as a good guy, telling the guards to seal the castle and move the citizens to the emergency shelters, and stick together and let the beast come to them. I'm supposed to respect this guy now? I really would have been happier if he and his band had just been a criminal gang of child kidnappers instead. At least if they were criminals, they'd be seen as the bad guys by everyone around them. If they're seen as the good guys who are just doing their jobs, it almost eliminates the chance that they'll be punished. The audience will be expected to forgive him. The story ends with Sonic happy to spend a long night fighting monsters. And then he spin dashes straight through all of them in seconds because he can run at the speed of sound. No, that makes sense. In the next story, which is hopefully still by a different writer, the heroes start out in Crystal Cave. I had to look up which game that was in because it sounded familiar. And no, they're not in the Soul Dimension all of a sudden, that's Coral Cave. I heard about the story ahead of time, but I guess I confused the two caves because I always expected it to be Coral Cave. Because both would be equally pretty looking. And Coral Cave would be more interesting because it'd be in a different dimension. Instead, they're in a part of Black Knight setting. I like the idea that the settings in Black Knight are real parts of Marcia now. Tails admires the crystals, saying it's like the inside of a giant geode. This is more unpredictable than them being shocked at seeing a giant robot like I thought. Sally tells them to hurry up, and Tails flies and has them all carried ahead for some reason. The panel didn't show off why. Antoine says this is a long drop, and so that's why Eggman stopped the dig, because he used purely ground-based equipment. He could send robots with jetpacks over and bring the equipment down. I guess that's how they're planning on restarting the excavation. Tails gets given Nicole's and Emerald radar, and fortunately Sally and Antoine do acknowledge the place's beauty, since they're good guys. And Antoine looks on the bright side of Eggman sending the wrong robots as a result. He did send the right robots, they just stopped being the right robots here. Nicole tells Tails which kind of crystals these are, and says they aren't useful, and tells him to go ahead 1 meter. Tails wonders how the emerald ended up in here, and Nicole tells him not to say it's magic, which baffles me because literally everyone on the entire planet who knows about the emeralds should know that they're magical, and not scientific, and that they warp to different places because of magic. But her complaint is probably that it's magic doesn't address the question of how do the emeralds decide where to teleport to after Sonic goes super? Is it RNG? Like reality's computer program all of a sudden? Well, it must be a bit like a program if everyone speaks either English or French. Because Antoine speaks French. Tails tempts fate by being happy that he found the emerald super easily. Let me guess. Conflict will happen and come out of nowhere. They have just enough time to escape undetected. And yet they keep staying here, when they need to get out of here. Sally complains because Eggman will tear this cave apart looking for the emerald. Nicole says that making Eggman aware of their intrusion puts them and their mission at risk, as the mineral deposits aren't worth that. Yeah, just take pictures of the cave and put them all on Twitter. Then people will be able to see the cave whenever they want, and the cave won't need to keep existing if its sole purpose is to be stared at. Nicole should at least say that. She could be smart enough to at least try to offer a convincing argument for them. Sally's supposed to be pragmatic and intelligent. She's the wrong character to say they can't let the cave get destroyed. She'd agree with the sentiment, but regretfully want to go against it. Like, Antoine would make a bit more sense, but not by much. Maybe if Amy was here instead of Sally, it would work better. Because Amy's the more emotional one, the emotions-focused one, so she would convince a regretful Sally to do what her heart wants. Nicole gets put into an organic form, and a camera bot from Sadie M spots her admiring the beauty, which she can do because now she sees it with her eyes. So the robots reactivate, and Sally decides to make sure Eggman knows they took the emerald, believing that him wasting time looking for it isn't worth it anymore. Yeah, especially considering that it's not like Eggman is putting his full attention entirely on this. I'm sure he's multitasking because only his robots are here, not him. And because he's got armies, he's got tons of things going on at once. So even if his robots had been stuck here wasting time, it wouldn't have amounted to anything, because he'd still be accomplishing stuff on the side. He'd still have a whole bunch of different armies looking for each of the emeralds. Shouldn't they have always known that? It's not like he had literally only one Chaos Emerald looker, and it was entirely focused on that one task. It'd make more sense if they shut down the security to make things easier for them, not to make sure Eggman didn't know they were there. The first plot could have just been about the monsters attacking the city. If you really wanted to humor this plot point, it could have just skipped to Amy telling Rotor about the Queen firing Nicole. We didn't need to see an entire scene dedicated to it. We could have still had enough story to last the entire issue, because they could have put the story that's in the next issue here. The entire story was wasted on a frustrating, tedious waste of time where the royalty somehow blames Coral for supernatural events. It's just like a fanfiction where the bad OCs ruin the story. Everyone's an idiot, and the game characters are just props. Basically nothing happens. This story was by Ian Flynn. Just skip it. You could have assumed Coral would have ended up fired after the end of the last issue, so you wouldn't be that confused. It's just frustrating characters, there's no potential there, so there's nothing to say. Meanwhile, Ella Baker wrote the second story, where Sally decides not to destroy the Crystal Cave because it looks pretty. So they decide to stick to the simple solution and destroy all of the robots. Even though Eggman could still destroy this cave just to spite them afterwards. I mean, he's obviously multitasking with his armies anyways, so he could just send an army to do that. The camera spotted them appreciating the cave, so it would have footage of it. Logically, this cave would be doomed either way. The heroes would have to make a force field to protect this cave, and at that point, they'd be idiots for not giving their cities one too. I guess this was a good story, but barely anything happened. It's so basic. It's literally just the heroes like the way a cave looks. The end. How is that a must-read? I got almost the same thing out of it when FDA talked about it. Everyone likes the way Crystal Cave looks. Anyone could think that a story about it would involve people wanting to preserve it. I don't get the impression that it'd take a lot of effort to think this entire story. I just realized, this icy crystal cave reminds me of Ixis's cave from SatAM. I'm guessing we won't see Ixis here. I doubt Ixis was even a thought in their minds, when they could just reference the games instead, even though this is the perfect place for Ixis to show up before a proper reintroduction. Like, SatAM came out a pretty long time ago, and these are entirely new writers, not writers that have been with Archie since the beginning, so it really wouldn't surprise me if these guys had no idea that they missed out on an obvious SatAM reference. Nicole was made great use of because she just thinks in logic until she actually sees it as a person. And Tails had to fly while they all hung on to him to progress, and that's the explanation for why the mining stopped. I'm surprised we got a logical explanation so good. But this would have had actual impact if the panel had a zoomed out camera view actually showing Tails flying over in abyss and going down. Instead we just saw a close-up of Tails, one shot of him looking all the way down. If the art was better and panned out a lot, we could have seen a lot more of the cave to appreciate it and the one interesting thing that happened in it more. Instead, the only thing memorable about the story is the one-sentence basic plot. I expected a bit more out of Nicole seeing the crystals and thinking they're beautiful. Like, this is an important moment for establishing her character, and it's actually pretty quick. But at least that's good pacing. This was an alright story, but you don't get much out of it. Maybe it's because I've already been spoiled on the story's existence years ago, but the plot shouldn't be so basic that it's underwhelming to experience it after hearing one sentence about it. The story should have had a lot more comic space, and continued on to the next issue's second story, instead of the awful main story having most of the space just because it's by Flynn. I think Sonic the Comic had every story of like equal length. Why should the main story get preferential treatment every time? The point is, I'd rather the actually good story arc have a fully fledged story with lots of variety in what's happening. Maybe Sally's mission should have been an entire issue. Maybe Sally's arc would have been outright fantastic that way, if it wasn't forced to share space, and therefore have barely anything happen in each one. I won't be nitpicking that the story is too basic if it was this story and the previous side story put together, and the one after this, because then it'd be a story where a lot of things would be happening. I hope this writer's a mainstay from now on, because it'd be twice as easy on me to review the reboot if I could always look forward to a writer that's actually alright every time I read an issue, because he seems to write just fine. So I think he should be the main writer. But we'll see. It just says something that The instant I read a story written by another writer that's not Tracy Yardley, I immediately noticed that his writing was a whole level better than Flynn's.